This is for educational purpose only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardinas, to use this as an educational material. Good day! Our group will discuss George Med, the self, from the perspective of sociology. We have two topics that we will discuss on our group, but let's have our objectives first. Objectives. Number 1. Understanding the impact of cultural norms and values on the self. Analyzing the ways in which media and technology shapes our self-perception and identity. Number 2. Examining the role of consumerism and commodification in shaping the modern self. Evaluating the influence of individualism and self-expression in contemporary society. Number 3. Investigating the psychological effect of living a highly competitive and achievement-oriented society. Number 4. Analyzing the impact of social media on the self and self-esteem. And lastly, number 5. Understanding the relationship between the self and personal authenticity in a fast-paced and rapidly changing world.
What is sociology? Sociology is a social science that focuses on society, human social behavior, patterns of social relationships, social interactions, and aspects of culture associated with everyday life. How sociology influences ourselves, or why it is important to ourselves. So, sociology can help us to understand ourselves better, since it examines how the social world influences the way we think, feel, and act. It can also help with decision making, both our own and that of larger organizations.
The self as a product of modern society, among other constructions. Modernization has significantly changed a society, and this has affected how one individual builds and develops his or her identity. Pre-modern society was centered on survival. People behaved according to social rules and traditions, while the family and the immediate environment provided supervisions on how to get through life, choosing where to live and what line of work to do. Even who to marry was very limited. Modernization, however, has improved people's living conditions. A person in the modern society is free to choose where to live, what to do, and what to be with. However, stability has also decreased as traditions and traditional support systems, such as the family, have decreased in importance. In modern societies, individualism is dominant, and developing oneself identity is central. There are 4 cases of modernity. First is industrialism. What is industrialism? Industrialism is the social relations implied in the extensive use of material, power, and machinery, all in process of productions. Second is capitalism. What is capitalism? A production of system involving both competitive product, institution markets, and the commodification of labor power. Third is institution of surveillance. The massive increase of power path with limited passive power unreached by institution, especially in government. Fourth is dynamism. The most evident characteristics of a modern society. Modern society life is not a predetermined path with the limited options based on location, family, or gender. It is a society full of possibilities. Every time is a subject to change, and changes happen much more rapidly than before in human history.
Med and social self is based on the perspective that the self emerges from social interactions, such as observing and interacting with others, responding to others' opinion about oneself, and internalizing external opinions and internal feelings about oneself. Social self refers to how we perceive ourselves in relation to others. It involves relation building, empathizing, and communicating. A healthy or not so healthy social self will also impact your overall mental well-being and ability to meet life goals. In addition, Mead said that children go through certain stages as they develop as once a sense of self. The stage of self are imitation, play, game, and generalized other. Med shows a psychological analysis through behavior and interaction of an individual self with reality. The behavior is mostly developed through sociological experiences and encounters. This experience lead to individual behaviors that make up the social factors that create the communication in society.
Now I'm going to report about the social self. The social self is a concept in psychology that refers to the self concept that is constructed through one's experience and interaction with others. In other words, it is the self that is formed through social relationship and the influence of the groups and cultures to which a persons belong. It is important to note that the social self is not static, but rather is constantly changing and evolving as a person experiences different social situations and relationships. Additionally, people may have multiple social selves depending on the different social context, define themselves, and overall, the social self is an integral part of a person's sense of identity and helps individuals understand their place in the world and their relationships. From my own understanding about social self, it is important to note that the social self can change over time as an individual experience and relationships change. For example, a person's social self might change as they enter different stage of life, such as starting a new job, getting married, or becoming a parent.
The I and me are terms central to the social philosophy of George Herbert Mead, one of the key influences on the development of the branch of sociology called symbolic interactionism. The term refers to the psychology of individual, where in Mead's understanding, the me is the socialized aspect of the person, and the I is the active aspect of the person. One might usefully compare Med's I and me respectively with Sartre's choice and secretion. But Med himself matched up the me with Freud's censor and the I with the ego. The me is what is learned in interaction with others, and more generally, with the environment. Other people's attitude once internalized in the self. The constitute the me. This includes both knowledge about the environment, including society, but also about who the person is. Their sense of self, what the individual is for himself. It's not something that he invented. It is what his significant others have come to treat him as being. This is because people learn to see who they are, man or woman, old or young, etc., by observing the responses of others to themselves or their actions. If others respond to our person as, for instance, a woman, the person develops a sense of herself indeed as a woman. At the same time, the me disciplines the I by holding it back from breaking the law of the community. It is thus very close to the way in a man Freud's ego censors. The conscience arose from the critical influence of his parents, conveyed to him by the medium of the voice, to whom were added as time went to those who trained and taught him an innumerable and indefinable host of all the people in his environment, his fellow men, and public opinion. It is the attitude of the other in one's own organism as controlling the thing that he going to do. By contrast, the I is the response of individual to the attitude of the community. The I acts creatively through within the context of the me. Made notes that it is only after we have acted that we know what we have done, what we have said. People, he argues, are not automatons. Mead states that the I reacts to the self which arise through the taking of the attitudes. They do not blindly follow rules. They construct a response on the basis of what they have learned. The me, Mead highlight accordingly to those values that attach particularly to the I, rather than to the me, which cannot be calculated and which involve a reconstruction of the society, and so of the me which belongs to the society, taken together, the I and the me from the person or the self in Med social philosophy. According to Med, there will be no possibility of personality without the I and the me. Mead explored what he called the fusion of the I and me. It is the attribute of the religion, patriotism, and teamwork, nothing what he called particular sense of exaltation that belongs to them. He also considered that the idea of the fusion of the I and the me gives a very adequate explanation of his exaltation in the aesthetic experience. When there's a predominance of the me and the personality, we speak of a person as a individual conventional individual. His ideas are exactly the same as those of his neighbors. He is hardly more than a me under the circumstances. A shallow, brutal, conformist kind of personality that is all persona, with its excessive concern for what people think. The alternative, in many ways, Med's deal was the person who was definite personality who replies to the organized attitude in a way that makes a significant difference. With such a person, the I is the most important phase of experience. Mead recognized that it is normal for an individual to have all sort of selves, answering to all sort of different social reactions, but also that it was a possible for a tendency to break up personality to appear two separate me's and I's. Two different selves result the phenomenon of dissociation of personality. That's all. Thank you. Mid sees the person as an active process, not just a mere reflection of society.
We have three parts of self. First is individual self, second relative self, and lastly is collective self. So, individual self. This self-representation are positive and important, influence the processing of subsequent information, and that persons are motivated to maintain or elevate their self-image and to protect against possible deflation of their self-image. For example, persons regards themselves as better than average other, claim credit for adiatic or group success while displacing blame to others, derogate conveyors of unfavorable feedback, and when they cannot negate. Second is a relative self. Relative selves is a person's manifest a paramount desire for formation of stable interpersonal attachments, enhance and protect their relationships, resist the termination of existing relationships, and feel psychological and physical pain when socially excluded. For example, a person who acts rationally has good reason for what they do. This usually implies that they reflected on the possible consequence of their action and the goal it is supposed to realize. And lastly, is collective self. Collective selves, as a person, are profoundly influenced by their social groups in terms of conformity and belief polarization. The collective self may accord the optimal level of self-definition by simultaneously meeting competing needs for assimilation through intragroup comparison and differentiation through intragroup comparison respectively. Like for example, a person may hold the self-definition of being an environmentalist.
Marilyn Brewer and Wendy Gardner suggested a theoretical framework that encompasses three levels of self-definition: personal self, relational self, and collective self. In psychology, sense of self is what we use to describe a person's inner and outer self. The sense of self-definition refers to a person's view of the world and their role within it. It may include how one views their traits, beliefs, and purpose in life. Your personal self is directly related to your personality. That is to say, you can be extroverted, polite, neurotic, etc. Whatever the case may be, your personal self is going to be made up of different traits that define you. On the other hand, social selves are derived from the group you belong to. The concept of relational self is concerned with how the self is identified and what makes oneself differ from other selves. In this sense, the concept of relational self is an opposite to the concept of an autonomous self. The collective self consists of those aspects of the self that are based on memberships in social groups and categories. It refers to a perception of self as an interchangeable exemplar of some social category rather than a perception of self as a unique person.
Importance of collective self. A variety of behaviors and conditions can be predicted from elements of collective identity. The collective self has been linked to individuals' reactions and behaviors toward other people, especially toward members of other groups. The importance of collective self is it plays an important role in group perception and behavior. For example, prejudice, intergroup stereotyping, and discrimination. According to the social identity theory, individuals seek to achieve and maintain a positive social identity or collective self-esteem by establishing favorable comparisons between their own groups and outgroups. To achieve this, people discriminate against or derogate outgroup members relative to in-group members. It has been found that the mere act of categorizing oneself as a group member is sufficient to lead people to evaluate in-group members more positively than others and to allocate more rewards to them than to members of other groups. Elements of collective self also predict outcomes at the individual level. For example, collective self-esteem is related to psychological well-being. Satisfaction with life, lower depression, hopelessness, and burnout. Furthermore, there is evidence for relationships between ethnic and more specific context-relevant identities and achievement. Collective self-understanding reflects the basic norms and abstract values that a group holds, along with group's purpose, or whether group this is collective action group or organizational group. The collective self-understanding is therefore an abstract understanding of who the group is and what the group stands for. Importantly, it does not comprise specific attitudes or opinions that the group holds. It can instead be thought of as the general personality or essence that drives the group's behaviors. That's all.